Hello and welcome to The Money Trench, the music industry podcast with me, Mark Sutherland. Thanks to everyone who came down to the latest TMT social on Thursday. It was great to celebrate our imminent 100th episode with so many of the music industry's great and good, and huge thanks for your continued support. A quick shout out to Stereo Covent Garden, one of our favourite music venues in London, for hosting the Do. If you're looking for a venue for showcases, networking nights, listening parties or private events, it's well worth checking out. And the TMT events don't stop there. If you're listening on Monday, July the 20th, you should just have time to bag yourself a ticket for our latest TMT Tuesday showcase tomorrow in partnership with our friends at Fierce Panda. It's at the Victoria in Dalston and stars Opal Mag, Larlin and Gracie Friel. Head for the TMT newsletter or socials for all the details, and we will see you there. The Money Trench is supported by SOUNDON. SOUNDON is TikTok's all-in-one music distribution and promotion platform for artists and labels. Go to soundon.global to find out more and check out the SOUNDON track of the week in the TMT newsletter. And the Money Trench is also supported by TIXEL, the honest ticket exchange and waitlist, helping artists own their audience and protect fans from touts. Go to TIXEL.com to find out more and check out the TIXEL Gig of the Week in the TMT newsletter. And we support Earth%, the music industry's climate foundation. Check earthpercent.org for all the details. And this week, we're in TYX Studios, where we're joined by not one, but two music industry legends. Between them, they have decades in the record and management businesses, working for companies such as Island, Crown Talent, Virgin, RCA and Warner Music, and with artists including U2, Pulp, Take That, and Natalie Imbruglia. Now they're teaming up with some other biz legends, including previous TMT guest Nick Stewart, to launch a new music company. Please welcome the COO and CCO of Breaking Wave Group, Jeremy Marsh and Marc Marot.
Thank you.
Hello, fellas.
Thank you very much for looking after us, Mark.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing our best. How's your music week been? We are speaking the morning after England's exit from the World Cup, so thanks for turning up.
Well, my music, at the moment, I'm right in the cut and thrust of making records, so it's just, it's a reminder of how all-consuming it used to be for me, you know, having been out of the making records business for a little while. So it's a process that has no boundaries. And what I mean by that was that my first call was at 7:20 this morning from one of our artists asking me to approve a mix. Last night I was listening to her mix at about 10:30 at night. No respecter of the football or anything like that. So it's a busy time and it's good.
Okay, it might have been a blessed relief to miss the end of that match last night.
Yeah.
Jeremy, how are you doing?
I'm sort of fine on the basis that we made a very good showing in the previous match. And as you know, we launched the label 2 weeks ago today, and we managed to get a brilliant screening at the Royal Albert Hall before we did the presentation and then the 10cc gig.
You should have done that last night.
I know. I'm feeling very guilty that we didn't have a sort of part two. I think there's going to be a huge amount of postmortems on how England played, but at the end of the day, Lionel Messi crossed the ball with his wrong foot and scored an amazing goal in extra time that I think no team would have stopped, and we let them in and they outplayed us. So there we go.
Okay, welcome to the Footy Trench, our new podcast. But let's see how the rest of the music biz has been getting on with our roundup of the latest industry headlines. And our first story comes from Music Week, which looks at the launch of the government's first ever music plan. Entitled Turn It Up, it pledges a number of initiatives to boost the music industry, including more money for the Music Growth Package, the Music Export Growth Scheme and trade missions, backing for Ed Sheeran's Music in Libraries initiative, and the appointment of the government's first music champion, former UK music boss Michael Duggar. The moves have been cautiously welcomed by industry leaders. Jeremy and Mark, how do you feel about government intervention in the music industry? We didn't need this back in the day, did we?
We certainly need something now, and I'm particularly excited about the Ed Sheeran-inspired Music in Libraries initiative, because one of the things that's really struck me over time, you know, think about my time running Island Records, a great many of the artists that I signed, whether it would be PJ Harvey or Jarvis Cocker or Tricky or whatever, they didn't have the advantage of wealthy parents and of proper backing. They came from relatively ordinary loving backgrounds, but without the silver spoon in their mouth. But now there is this absolute tendency for it to become the domain of the wealthy, and I partly put that down to problems with state education. So the constant stripping out of music from the curriculum is removing the opportunity for a lot of young people to learn their chops effectively. And that means that it's kind of the public school domain where there is music education, where it's funded, where there are instruments and everything else, that is effectively de-democratizing the music industry. And I'm all for the democratization of it. But it does lead to questions. At the moment, it's a plan to put studios in public libraries across the country, and it's well funded, so it's £2.2 million. But what does that actually mean? Is it a tiny little booth with an Apple laptop, which people, arguably could have at home? I think we need to see the detail, really. But I'm very excited about the idea of the democratization of music again.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true across the board, Jeremy, isn't it? The film industry, other industries are very good at getting funding from the government and doing things with it. We're less experienced. Are you confident this will make a difference?
I'm not confident unless we have the right people in place to actually, if you like, with my operations hat on, to implement this. And when you go back to Cool Britannia and Tony Blair, it's whether it was good or bad, it got a huge amount of attention and an awful lot of buy-in from the artists. And my sense is with Andy Burnham coming down and with the devolution spreading politics across the UK, there's a real personality there. And if he's going to work with Lisa and Andy, and this is the other thing, is the culture secretary has to stay in position for longer than 6 months, because it's very often a revolving door to the next position in the cabinet. So if Burnham and Andy double down and they actually commit and implement this, then I think it's got a good shot, because there's lots of backing from lots of people. Andrew Lloyd Webber, for example, has the MISS project, which is Music in Secondary Schools Trust Instruments. You've got Billy and Al Webber with the other songs working with the Brit School. So you've got a lot of people coming at it from different angles, but it needs personality. Personality and action. I loved Fergal Sharkey for all that he did to kind of raise the profile of UK music, and I think we need someone else. Michael Dugar, I think, is that right, has been appointed the music champion. I don't know this guy, but a lot will rest on his shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Lisa and Andy launch this at the UK Music Do on Monday, and her speech did make you hope that she's going to stay in position, but there's no guarantees in politics, sadly, are there? So, okay, well, good stuff. Next up, Music Business Worldwide has a story on the new Vivo report that says streaming is accelerating how audiences discover and revisit catalogue content, with 65% of Gen Z apparently feeling nostalgic for eras they were not alive to experience. That means 74% of viewers of Bob Marley's No Woman, No Cry video were born after the song was released. Jeremy and Mark, you're working with some veteran artists and breaking wave. Are you pleased to hear these results?
Yeah, but we're not surprised to hear those results, Mark. This is partly our raison d'etre. We strongly believe that if you've got artists that have an audience and they have the will to carry on, but they may have effectively drifted away from the major record company structure, it's our job to be able to sort of guide them back in with new techniques and new ideas. But what the article I read with interest is that it doesn't say that it's driving them to discover new music. It basically says that it makes them feel nostalgic, and that's two different things. I don't quite know, but what the article really was trying to say.
Yeah, I think having had a bit of experience working with the Warner Global Catalogue team, the synchronization benefits of a placement of a song like Hounds of Love in Running Up the Hill, Kate Bush, in Stranger Things, or Fleetwood Mac with the skateboarding, So when you get a fantastic sync, you get this enormous amount of eyeballs on the video, which then results in streams. So if it pulls in a younger generation, then that's great. I remember one of the funniest and best things I saw was two young lads watching, listening, but they were filmed watching In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. And the track goes through, and suddenly you have the drum break, and then these two guys go, "Whoa, this is fantastic!" And it's like, the rediscovery of catalogue is essentially where it's at the moment. And what we'll come on to talk about with Breaking Wave is what we're going to try and do is focus on a small number of artists that we can give a lot of time to work on their heritage, their legacy, and then freshen it up with some new music. But it is great. And the fact that Vivo have highlighted the fact that people are seeing and hearing things and then going to discover it in terms of catalogue is great.
Yeah, I mean, when you guys were running major labels, catalogue was part of the business. But
no, catalogue was enormous for Island. The thing that was really important to me running Island Records throughout the 1990s was that I knew that I had almost all my overhead covered by catalogue sales. So the risk money in new art, which allowed me, I believe, to invest significantly more than some of my competitors. But I had this incredible catalogue that had Bob Marley and had U2 and Robert Palmer and Steve Winwood and Grace Jones. So we had this and we were also in obviously the CD replacement period. So there was a really fantastic underpinning that we were getting, almost 7 figures a month just from the catalogue that helped me invest.
But you're right, Mark, that other labels like RCA, the one that I was running, was 80% frontline. Yeah. And we had a tiny catalogue. So companies probably like Island, Chrysalis, Virgin had that rich catalogue, whereas some of the ones that were newer or were offshoots of other majors were pretty much existing on their frontline, whereas we know now 75% of revenues are coming from catalogue streaming.
Does that change the game? Does it? I mean,
well, it's changing the game. Yeah. And again, we'll come back to it, but the resource that major labels have historically put against their catalogue has been a fraction of what's thrown into the front line. And as a result, a lot of the talented executives are in the front line, and a lot of the catalogue side needs to have that same talent migrate across. I think it's happening, but again, the reason for Breaking Wave is we can go straight to that and put a finger on it rather than wait, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, fantastic. Great stuff. And our final story comes from Variety, which reports that Iron Maiden have sold a slice of their catalogue name, image and likeness rights to Pop House, the investment firm founded by ABBA's Bjorn Ulvaeus. The deal will enable Iron Maiden to pursue new creative ventures, with the first collaboration, the Infinite Dreams Museum Experience, launched at Maiden's Edfest event at Nebworth the other week. Fellas, you're looking at IP generation at Breaking Wave, aren't you, as one of your...
We are. Let me take this one. Rod and Andy are two of the smartest men in the business, and now joined by Dave Shack, who's been MD of Phantom for probably the last decade. They've curated and grown every strand of Iron Maiden income, from touring to merch to beer to charities to everything, better than almost any other brand in the business. And the fact that they partnered with Pop House, Jess Korovos, the new CEO, super smart, used to run the Lloyd Webber organisation, then opened the Manchester arena. So she knows exactly what she's doing. And it's just the most brilliant partnership, because Rod and Andy would not have partnered with anybody who couldn't complement what they were already doing. It's a machine that's run, selling millions of tickets, millions of albums. So... And the other point is that there is a cartoon element to Iron Maiden. When you go and see them, I've seen about a dozen gigs, having worked with them since the Parlophone merger at Warner, where Eddie the Robot comes out, and all of the artwork and the Britishness and the pyramids and all of the themes that run through Iron Maiden's music is theatrical. And so all of that can then be morphed into either immersive experiences or museums or whatever. So this is a proper synergy of 1 + 1 will equal 3. So great move. Hats off.
We've got ABBA Voyage. We're going to get Maiden Voyage.
I think what you might get...
It's not a bad name, is it?
It's very good. I think you might get a Maiden Flight, because, as you know, Bruce Dickinson's pilot.
Yeah.
And I've been on the 666 plane on a couple of adventures. And so I think the sky, literally, okay, here's my pun. The sky's the limit with the Maiden Flight. And I think whatever they do, it's going to be, the sum of the parts will be amazing. I think we're great.
Okay. Great stuff. Thanks, fellas. And don't forget, for even more music industry insight, sign up for the TMT newsletter at themoneytrench.com. But now it's time to talk to this week's guests, Jeremy Marsh and Marc Marot of Breaking Wave Group. Fellas, you officially launched Breaking Wave a few weeks ago, although you've been doing it for a while, haven't you? How's it all going so far?
It's good. We're already accreting artists.
Yep.
We haven't started ablating them yet. So we've started signing, and we're working with some really good people that we really like. And we've got a couple of other things that are in the offing that we can't talk about that are very exciting too. So kind of off to the races, but I'm just finding myself back at the coalface making records, which is a bit of a surprise, and I'm really enjoying it.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah, I mean, is this a good time to launch a new independent music company?
Yeah, completely. I think when you see new labels launch, very often it's with the promise of we will develop the best new greatest artist, and then you look in a couple of years' time and go, well, how did that go? We're launching with 3 or 4 acts that people know. So our dartboard is going to be full of targets that we can aim at over the next year to 18 months. There's a couple of new artists that we've got, and it's all in our press release, so we can either talk about them individually or it's out there in the public domain. But we're going to give ourselves time to establish what we're doing. The other thing that we wanted to achieve from the launch is actually to surface, because until you actually make your statement of intent, outline who's in the company, outline who we're working with, it's unlikely people are going to come and see us. So over the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, couple of months, we expect to have a number of conversations with other artists. And because it's across records, publishing, management and projects, it can be in any guise, i.e. either help us with a release, or will you help us put out the release, or will you help us get a song publishing deal, or would you manage us? So it's a really nice 360.
It's really interesting for me because it was one of the things that I didn't really think about when I put my head above the parapet with Jeremy and everybody and said that we're back and that we're releasing records. People started sending me music. It was a bit of a shock. And I got inundated with new music.
Not on cassette anymore, so.
Not on cassette, no. But it's easier to send now than it was before. So I'm just working my way through, not a pile, but an email list.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I mean, there have been a lot of changes to the label landscape, both indie and major, in the last few years. Does that create opportunities for a company like yours?
I think it does, and we've started with a very flexible model. It's probably worth explaining how it came together. When I was working at Warner, I was doing a lot of work with some of the big catalogue acts like the Eagles, and Nick Stewart, who you've interviewed before, was forever saying to me, I feel there's room for a label with all this experience that I've got. And I said, well, Nick, that's great, but you can't do it on your own. So about 4 weeks later, he rang me up and said, oh my God, I've just run into Marc Marot, one of my protégés who I helped get into the seat at Island Publishing and then Island Records. And I said, Nick, that's fine, but you need some grown-ups. You know, you've got these two fantastically zany, creative guys, but you need some breaks. You need some intelligence. You need some people who are going to sit on
I'm getting really insulted.
Other end of the seesaw. So I rang up our old buddy James.
At least you've got good looks.
Turn your phone off. So I rang up our old buddy James Radici, who'd come out of Warner's a couple of years ago, and said, James, you know, are you up for this ride? Are you up with this? You know, it's a bit like we'll ride off into the sunset and see what we can do. So we put together this gang of 4, and I said to Nick, it feels well balanced. We've got you with your heritage experience, U2, all the great acts you've worked with. You've got Mark, who's got fantastic experience running couple of very successful labels and management companies, and then you've got James and I with a long history at Warner, and James loved out there in the lawyer and legal community, and I've run a lot of campaigns, so that's how it came together, and that in the context of launching a label is unique, because what you tend to see is you see 1 or 2 people with a major label backing, and obviously people like Max and Julie. It's a whole new spectrum. If you like, they're up above the ozone layer. We're going to be in the weeds with everybody else, but we're doing it with a group of people who are confident, who've got a good track record. We aren't setting the bar fantastically high. I mean, in terms of standards, clearly we are, but we're not setting that expectation saying we're going to shoot to the moon on the first home run. We just want to build this entity and be a home for artists and give them time. And I think one of the real issues that labels have is they end up spreading themselves too thin. And we made this promise to ourselves that every artist will get as much time as it takes. Zoom calls and these 30-minute meetings that really are a product of COVID and that period when we all got used to working fantastically well in short bursts. isn't what it's all about. It's about time. So that's one of the big differentiators for us.
And your press release said that you want to be an alternative to the major label model. Is that? That sounds ambitious.
It sounds ambitious, but if you look at the catalogue aspect, as I said, most of their resources are trained on frontline, so they're spread very thin for a fantastically large catalogue. So let's say we have 4 established artists. We've got 4 people. In fact, we've got Beth as well. We've got 5, and we've got a small backup staff. So we feel we're just going to spend that large amount of time working with an established artist, not only on new material, but also helping them maximize their past glories.
Yeah. And it's rather interesting that, again, can't mention names, but one of the artists that we're negotiating with at the moment, the management company really, even though we will have no involvement in catalogue, we can't have by virtue of the deal that we're doing, they very much want us to take an interest in focusing the catalogue and making sure that whatever happens with the catalogue supports what happens with the next record. And that's the kind of experience that we can bring to bear.
And how about the new acts? Because
that's my heartland, Mark. So if I have a helicopter overview on my career, some names that one can name drop now seem very established. So I did sign Massive Attack as a publisher. I signed De La Soul as a publisher, and at Ireland we went from PJ Harvey, Pulp, even Elbow, Cranberries, Stereo MCs, Tricky, an amazing group of people that now you could say, well, they're all very established, but at the time of signing, they were absolutely no one and they were nowhere. The public hadn't heard them. And so they were exciting and they were entirely risk. Every bit of it was risk, effectively, because we didn't know whether a gatekeeper at Radio 1 or at MTV was going to block us at the time. 9 Inch Nails, for argument's sake, that I signed. So in reality, my love is new music. And so I'm looking for things that emotionally trigger me. Which is what I've always done. It's literally down to a visceral gut feeling.
I mean, breaking artists seems to be a lot harder than it was.
Very difficult. Very difficult.
Are you confident you can?
Nope. But we're confident that we'll give it a really good crack.
Yeah, and Mark, I don't want to over-egg this word time, but it does come back to not overloading our system and being able to drip build artists. And when you look at Sophia or Ollie, who's the front person in Patience Please, both these artists were not going to put undue pressure on them in that first couple of years. You've got to build. And you look at all the great Joe Charrington, who you had on the other, was talking about Olivia Dean. It actually took whatever it is, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You look at Ray, a lot of these artists, but going back to the first principles of Breaking Wave, and I said to Nick and Mark, we have to have air cover. We have to have established artists that allow us to release records or manage them and have income. That means we can build a company under which we can develop 2 or 3 new acts. So when our entire success of the model does not exist on the new acts.
I'm going to clarify for my partner sitting next to me that this was not a polemic aimed at saying I need more money for more signings. I'm quite happy with the 2 that I've got, and we're sticking there for now. There's no.
And it's very interesting for me again seeing Mark work with the new acts. The amount of time he's putting into it, whether it's 10 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock in the morning, you can't do if you've got 30 acts. Yeah. And the first principle of Breaking Wave is this time element.
You've talked about it before, Jeremy, which is time poverty. The reality is that each of the senior acts that we're working with have at one point or the other complained that they don't know who they can talk to and have cogent, proper, long conversations with about their career, about their misgivings, about their insecurities. And that's what we intend to provide. And it can be quite time-consuming, but it's a really important thing for artists to actually be able to communicate properly with their label and with their management.
Yeah. And now, Jeremy, you'd been still in the major label system.
Yeah.
Recent times, Mark, you pretty much left the music business, right?
Well, I did for a little while. I went off into fine art for 7 years. Yeah.
Well, we come on my fine art podcast and we'll talk about that. But
Okay.
but what made you guys sort of want to go back and sort of, I mean, you're almost starting all over again. People know you.
Yeah.
But in terms of the company, you are
Yeah.
pretty much starting from scratch, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, so the fine art experience was fantastic. So it was the first thing I'd ever done in art. And I won't go into great detail, but I partnered with a painter and we created what the BBC said was the world's first fine art augmented reality. And we had an exhibition of World War One, and we employed Sean Bean, Christopher Eccleston, Gemma Arterton, Stephen Graham, amazing actors to perform the most powerful World War One poetry. And it resulted in 12 exhibitions, including 4 national museums. And it was the first thing I'd ever done in art. But it dragged me out of music because I was enjoying it so much. So I didn't leave music purposefully or willfully. I was a bit sick of the business of music, not with music. But I ran into this area and found it actually significantly more difficult than I thought that it would be, from the point of view that I was having to put myself into the spotlight rather than putting the spotlight onto the artists that I've always worked with. I've always been in service to people. But basically what happened was that I was in my studio one day and an unnamed artist who I have had a business relationship with in the past rang me up and said, we're going to make an album, but we're not prepared to do it unless you agree to manage us. And I was in art at that time, but I loved them so much that I said, well, let me think about it. Yes. And suddenly I was back in music, thinking about music. And then and also I'd been kind of, as my father would say, up in the mountains in Spain where I have a home, contemplating my nipples, as my father used to say. I don't know what he meant by that.
You're on your own here, Mark.
Exactly. That's what I'm drifting into. So I was up there in Spain, writing the book, 85,000 words in, thinking, you know what, I'm not done. I felt like the Rutger Hauer, Roy Batty figure in Blade Runner. I've seen C-beams off all of that stuff, and all of this will be lost like tears in the rain. And I was not prepared to let it be lost. I really kind of made me think that I love music so much. I wanted to be back.
Yeah. Well, welcome back. Great to have you back. And you've put a great team of execs together. A lot of legendary figures working in Breaking Wave. Do you feel like you can recreate the glory days? Because it's a very different business these days.
I think when we come to latest and greatest, I'm going to mention my boss, the guy called Rob Dickens, taught me one thing, and it was a brutal lesson, because I joined a company thinking I was going to be controlling the group of people that were working for me. When I suddenly realized they were actually his team, and the team that you put around you is everything when you're running a business. Breaking Wave exists through this process of osmosis where Nick kicked off the idea, ran into Mark, I ran James, bingo, we had a company. And we felt like a team. We feel like a team. It's very hard. If we'd started with a blank sheet of paper and started ringing people up, Breaking Wave would have not existed.
Correct.
This is literally incidents and accidents all coming together. We then found our investors within a 4-week period. They loved the idea. Kenny Gates grabbed my shoulder at a Nordorf event and said, what are you doing? We had a Pias deal. Everything has just happened. And when things fall into place like that, there is a karma to it. And you have to grab that moment. And the fact that life, if you're fit and healthy and you've got the appetite and the energy to do it, the American system has shown you can go on. Dear Clive Davis went on into his 90s. Doug Morris founded a new label in his 80s. It's only the old-fashioned system that says you retire at 65. And when I came out of Warner's, I came out going full steam ahead. I chair 2 or 3 other companies. I've always been busy. And when I met this group of people, we just went, let's go. But we're going at a pace that we can sustain rather than some weird light brigade charge going down the middle of the corridor that'll be all over by Christmas, because that just doesn't work. And the number of people that have blown through millions of pounds starting and running a label, the list is legendary. We are if you like, starting at the opposite end of that and just building this up slowly.
We're all a bit like a cooperative, you know. There's a lot of these sort of edifices to the personality that fail. These special labels fail. One, firstly, because of the salary, and two, because of the cost of the office. We draw all of us from secretary on. We draw the same amount of money from the business as each other, and it's not a democracy. You know, we do have our own divisions within it, our own responsibilities within it, but we're trying to build it to be sustainable and to have longevity.
Yeah, and have fun.
And have fun. We love working together.
Yeah, this is a business that works really well when people are having a good time. The business, it's very easy for it to get neutered in the major label system. The changes that are going on and will continue to go on, you know, whether it be through consolidation or the fact the owners want more profit, just means inevitably there are too many compromises. And that's one of the reasons we were happy to be outside that.
Okay, well, let's talk about how you got inside that back in the day, because you both sort of lucked into the music industry, didn't you? Really, it was
no. God,
you were Tim Rice's gardener or something.
I was. That's literally. Oh my God, you have done your research, Mark. Congratulations. I was literally, but he refused to help. So there's the story. So I was digging his Jerusalem artichokes, I remember, on a pissing down with rain. And he and his wife, Jane, at the time, called me into the kitchen because I was so wet. And they said, what is a relatively, clearly an educated boy doing digging our Jerusalem artichokes? And I said, well, I'm a musician. And Tim Rice just put his hand over his face and he said, all right, bring your demos next week. And I did. And then 3 weeks later, I was in a studio in Llanfair Ceredigion in Wales recording demos for him for chess, I think he was working on at the time. So it was lovely that I went from the garden to the studio within that short period of time. He was recording for Robert Stigwood at the time, and I asked him for an introduction to Robert Stigwood because I had pretensions about A&R, and he and Jane sat me down in the kitchen and said, absolutely not. I said, why not? They said, because they'll eat you alive. And you're too gentle, and so we're not going to help you. You need to do this on your own if you're going to do it. And that was the end of that.
Well, you proved them wrong. I hope you went back.
Absolutely.
But take your Jerusalem.
But I did have the same. I also had the same conversation with Blackwell. So there was a point round about 19. I was running Blue Mountain Music, and I was running Island Visual Arts, which was the film and television production side of Ireland. And I'd had an amazing meeting where I'd pitched to Alan Yentob 2 projects, 1 series and 1 film, and he said yes to both. I was 26 years old. I had no idea what I couldn't do, and that was my secret strength. Blackwell encouraged me to do what I wanted to do, and I was with Blackwell, so it was Yentob, Blackwell, and I pitched. I was a baby. I was 26 years old, and I remember standing outside the restaurant waiting for a cab, and Chris said, you know, I think you can run Island Records one day, but you're too soft, you're too gentle, you need to toughen up. And it was like, that's the second time I'd heard that, you know.
Did you do anything to toughen up?
No, he helped. So he was we're going to talk about mentors, and obviously, clearly, he's my hero. But he put me on the board of Island Records, even though I had nothing to do with Island Records. I was publishing in film and television. He put me on the board of Island Records and said, go to every board meeting and don't say a word, just listen. And it was I had 4 years of watching how it all worked without actually having to make much of a contribution at the time, but I learnt an awful lot. Yeah.
And Jeremy, you had to stalk every record company in London.
Yeah, to get a job. When my mother died, we went through the little box of Jeremy stuff, and in it were the 30 letters of rejection. I mean, I'd written in for managing director jobs, for head of sales, for van drivers, and they'd all gone, as an educated kid with no experience, you can't come in. So I sat in reception at RCA till I got a job in telesales. And that allowed me to work there. 6 o'clock, I could wander around, and Matthew Freud was 5 Stars press officer. Corder was under Peter Robinson's wing. You know, it was in Bedford Avenue. It was an extraordinary time. And then from there, I was able to apply for jobs in marketing, and, sort of move through various jobs. But one of the things that Mark may have forgotten, in about 1989, I think John Kennedy was both of our lawyers.
Yes.
And John had been asked by Rob Dickens to find him a young MD, because Paul Conroy had just disappeared off to Chrysalis. Max Holt was running Atlantic, and he needed someone to run the Warner label. So Kennedy basically said, I've got my 2 young kids. I've got Marot and Marsh. And bizarrely, Mark ended up running Island Records at 29, and I ended up running Warner Brothers Records at 29. And so we were the 2 youngest MDs in the business at that time, and possibly ever. I don't know if anyone's been made president of a major at 29. Mm-hmm. But the fact that however many years on, 36 years on, we're now forming another company is just a strange...
I want to step back and credit Nick Stewart. So I was working for a tiny little... He was our partner, obviously. I was working for a tiny little independent publisher called Eaton Music at the time. And he was releasing records, even though he was running the Blue Mountain Music Publishing, he was releasing records as well through Island. And I was the publisher of that particular record, and he was the label. And we just got on really well. And he just plucked me from obscurity, doubled my salary from £5,000 to £10,000, and
those were the days.
But gifted me my career. And I'm saying this to him, looking at him, saying thank you for what you did for me.
Yeah. Although you almost got fired at Blue Mountain straight away, didn't you?
Blue Mountain Music was a very personal company to Chris. It was the things that he loved. It had U2, Bob Marley, Free that he produced. It had all sorts of rights in it that he particularly loved and that often he had produced or been deeply involved in. And he didn't want just anyone running it. And he hadn't given Nick carte blanche, I think, to employ me. So I started under a cloud where everybody except me in the company knew that I was going to be out the door the moment Chris came into the country. And what happened was that Chris came into the country. I was summoned to go and spend time with him on a Saturday at his home near Reading. And I had no idea. So I'd listened to every song in the Blue Mountain catalogue, 22,000 songs, and I had made Rolodex notes. I'm sending this one to Paul Young. I'm sending this one to Tina Turner. And I went with this Rolodex and I laid out the plans. And Chris said, why don't you stay the night? And so I had dinner with him. And then all Sunday we played Belgian pool and listened to records. And then on the Monday morning, I got a call from John Leftley, who was the company accountant, said, you had a really good weekend, didn't you? I said, yeah, I did. It was fantastic. And he said, no, you had a really good weekend because Chris has appointed you managing director and he's offered you a salary of £20,000. So within 6 weeks, I'd gone from £5,000 to 20. And I was thinking, this music business is easy. This is going to be fun. And £20,000 back in 1984 was pretty good.
Money.
Pretty good, you know.
We'd take that now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that would be a pay rise from Breaking Wave, let me tell you.
No, I mean, you were sort of an island lifer. Jeremy, you worked for basically every label going pretty much in those days. Were they all different experiences for you?
I think there was a lot of label hopping to get to RCA in 92. The journey up, and incredible, probably my version of Island was Virgin, where I spent 3 or 4 years and went from a junior marketing manager to managing director of their associated labels, which was Siren 10, Circa, EG, Enigma, Virgin America. And we had 9 platinum albums in 1 year from new artists, including Soul to Soul, Nena Cherry, Paula Abdul, Lenny Kravitz, T'Pau, Cutting Crew, Breathe. And it sort of looked like Christmas every single week of the year. And then we had Ferenc Spanner PR, we had all the best team around us. And in those days, mobile's just invited, no email, blah, blah, blah. We were listening to all the charts on a Sunday night, coming in and going, we're number one again. So that was part of the reason that I got offered the job at Warner. But the reality was when I got to Warner's, I was in shorts and everyone else was in suits. And it was the most terrifying time in my life. And that was my university. I learnt on that job. I didn't do it very well. As I say, the team that I inherited belonged to someone else, the chairman, but it taught me how to run a label. So when I arrived at RCA in 92, where I then spent the rest of the decade and became president of BMG, overseeing Arista, deconstruction, everything else, I sort of knew how to do the job. But there are these incredible learning curve moments where you probably end up getting fired if it all goes horribly wrong. But when I came out of the Warner situation, because John Preston, who was my boss, not only at RCA, but previously at Polydor, came to get me and almost kind of pull me out of Warner to go. But RCA was bust. It was broken. But what I did was I went in there and I let everybody go, hired Mike McCormack to run A&R from Virgin Music, Hugh Goldsmith, who was publisher of Sky Magazine, and off we went. It's very like Breaking Wave. It was like, okay, here are the horses, in we go. We're gonna shoot all the baddies, and off we went. And we launched Take That. We got Annie Lennox, M People, Deconstruction, and it was the summer of all those learnings over the bits before, having worked with some great people. But you have these bruising mentors and moments, and you've just got to make the most of them. And we talked about it in an MBW.
You've got to be a good mentee.
You have, and this is my point, and we talked about it in my MBW interview, with which you kindly did. We put together, Sonny Takar called it an Avengers-style group that included McCormack, Sonny Takar, Simon Cowell, Nick Raymond, Christian Tattersfield, Nick Raphael, Joe Charrington, David Joseph. The list went on and on. We had them all in RCA for 3 years, 3 to 5 years. And
that is an amazing
team. And from that group of people spawned just about a president in every label. Yeah. And this mentorship is why I love what we're doing at Breaking Wave now. So whether it's mentoring Nick Stewart, who is, as Mark was saying, he's brilliant. He's just this creative loose cannon that needs stirrups and reins, and you have to get on this
and
horse. And a whip, and you've got to ride it, as you do occasionally, Mark. But that's what James Radici and I do. You know, it's all part of the push and pull of a label, and this incredible experience that we've all had as.
I don't know. Interestingly, Osman Aralp, who ran A&M Records, great friend of mine, once said to me, and I'm thinking about the characterization of RCA. So he once said to me that he said London Records is a gang. He said A&M Records is a club. He said Island Records, you're a cult. It's like,
very
yes,
good.
I'll take that. I'll take that. You know, where were you? What were you?
Yeah, and it's very true, Mark. If you flip back to one of your other questions about what's happening in the majors, you wouldn't describe any of them as a gang anymore, any of them as a tribe, any of them as a cult, because they've had to become
grown up.
Yeah, almost grown up. And I think where the indie sector has got the ability to do it, and you know, Alan McGee's got a little club in a corner. Be Unique have got a little club in a corner. We want Breaking Wave to be
a cult,
but to be its own identity.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the Island Cult then, because you presided over a pretty phenomenal period for the label, and you had a great team there as well.
I was literally, it was the team. I did what Jeremy just talked about, is that I inherited a broken Island Records, quite frankly. We'd just been sold, so there was that confusion about where we fitted into the world. And in a way, it was a coup that got me the job. Because I had sat on that board for 4 years and watched it deteriorate, and the quality of the acts were wrong. And I won't go into detail, but it was more than that. This tiny little company had 120 artists on a worldwide basis, everyone needing advances, photography, support, stock manufacturing, stock risk, you know, everything. A&R, it was completely wrong. And I sat with Chris. I sat with Chris and said, look, he was distracted by hotels and films. And I said, you need to look at your roster. You need to listen to the music that Island has got. And you need to make a decision about what you want Island to be. Because he only had 5 years in his 5-year contractual earn-out. And that happened on a Friday. Over the weekend, I went off to a senior management polygram course in Noordwijk in Holland. And on the Monday, I got the phone call saying, you're now the managing director. And it was like, this is you know. And my salary was considerably more than £20,000. But the point being was that I did what Jeremy did. I smashed it to pieces. And I had obviously the amazing mentor in Chris Blackwell, but Roger Ames was very, very helpful to me. He was a friend. He was not my boss. I was nowhere in the food chain. He was running a rival, but he sat me through saying, you need to take all the bad news in year one, smash it to bits. It's somebody else's fault. Get rid of everything that needs get rid of. All the redundancies, all the acts dropping, do it all in year one because somebody else gets the blame, not you. It's like, okay. And that's what I did. I followed his advice and I built the team. And that was the important thing, is that I was 29 years old and pretty much all of the key people, head of A&R, Nick Angel, Julian Palmer for Fourth and Broad with a dance label, my head of marketing, head of sales, everybody were number twos within companies where they'd hit a glass ceiling because the number one was too solid. So Dave Bates running A&R for Mercury Records is where Nick Angel sat underneath. But I'm very good at spotting my own weakness. And my weakness at the time was that as a publisher, you don't sell anything to the public. It's much more right. It's a B2B business in reality. And so Nick knew how to make records. And so I needed somebody that was, and also he's a tough guy and I'm a gentle guy. And I needed a tough guy to sit next to me, to effectively be an enforcer in certain ways. But I did bring in a really potent team. And because of, I loved working with Chris Blackwell so much, and because I'm so imbued in the culture of Island Records that it was not possible for me to do anything that wasn't in the Island image. It was just so ingrained within me. So in terms of building the cult, I had that's all I could do. I didn't even know I was doing it, but I was so ingrained in the cult also of understanding the A&R policy of Ireland for the bits that had made Ireland great. And that's what I was trying to follow.
And Jeremy, I guess you were not doing that over at RCA BMG, but I mean, you're the man who's responsible for Simon Cowell's success, aren't you?
Well,
right?
Simon was lurking in a corner at Arista, in the A&R department, and they would run the A&R meeting, and at the end of the meeting ask Simon to play his songs, and they'd just laugh at him. So Simon was the kind of the light entertainment at the end of the session. So John Preston, the chairman, who again a very kind, gentle man, he's sadly no longer with us, rang me up and said, look, I think Simon's got something. Would you meet him? So I got together with Simon. We had a fun lunch that turned into a fun afternoon. And I said to him, look, Simon, I don't know where this is going, but we've got a skiing trip. There's 5 of us going off for 3 or 4 days. Would you like to come with us? So anyway, Simon, having never skied, and he did ski in jeans and a Crombie coat, and then had a massive crash at the bottom of the ski run. Anyway, we got going, and I said, Simon, just give me the rationale. And he said, I can do it without radio. And as you remember at the time, radio was really the entry point to every critical success. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm going to do TV themes. So I said, well, give me an example. He said, Power Rangers. Okay, what do you need? He said, I need a flight to Virgin, flight to LA on Virgin. He was very specific about Virgin. And I'll go and do a deal with Saban Entertainment for the Power Rangers. So anyway, I sort of forget about this. He has the ticket. And a week later, my lovely PA, Suzanne, said, is Simon on the phone? Not quite, would you take the call direct, but Simon on the phone anyway. So I grabbed it and I said, where are you? He said, I'm in the office of Mr. Saban at Saban Entertainment. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I've got a deal for the Power Rangers album outside of the UK, 200 grand. And I went, oh, fuck it, do it. So anyway, Simon comes back, and the theme Go Go Power Rangers was very much like Paw Patrol for kids at the moment. And the next thing we did, I think we sold 1 million albums across Europe. and what Simon then did with World Wrestling Federation, with I think even Roland Rat came into it. He produced this incredible legacy of soundtrack albums that were sold through TV. So that was the entry point. And then the real tipping point for Simon came when our fantastic head of single sales into Woolies, Denise Baton, came in. I won't do her lovely Brummie accent. Called Simon and I in for a cup of coffee. She said, if you can give me the track that was performed in Soldier Soldier by Robson Green and Jerome Flynn, it was Unchained Melody, I can get 100,000 pre-orders from Woolies. So within a week, we had signed Robson and Jerome, put them in with Mike Stock, produced it. and we did 3 million albums that Christmas on Robson and Jerome.
Can I'm going to...
No.
Yeah. So you talked about you'd have your Simon Cowell moment in the A&R meetings.
Yeah.
We used to have our Simon Cowell moments in A&R meetings. We used to break the A&R meetings just a few times just to listen to Roland Rat and laugh at Simon.
Yeah.
Now who's laughing?
So, and the brilliant thing was we then put Simon under Nick Raymond's wing, and he learnt about pop music. Nick at that time was making these amazing Take That records that were just selling millions of videos, of albums, etc., etc. So Simon learnt that. And he said, right, I'm going to do my own band. And he put together 5 with Chris Herbert, who found the Spice Girls. Then he went into Westlife. Then he met Simon Fuller and Pop Idol, and away it went. But no, I'm very happy to say we sort of dug Simon out of a trench with a lot of kindness. He was mentored by some fantastic people, Mike McCormack, Nick Raymond, Hugh Goldsmith. And under that sort of umbrella of kindness and time, he flowered into this extraordinary personality. And he's still a great mate, but of course he's off on a different planet. So, yeah.
And how big do you guys want Breaking Wave to get? Do you want to be as big as some of those companies you used to work for ultimately?
I think you can lose you can literally defeat the point of what we're trying to do in doing so. Yeah. Because what would happen is that suddenly we have 10 artists on the roster, and we then have to build out the system and the people and the structure and everything else. And it's not wanting to lose that personal service for the artists. So I think that, we have no limit to our ambition in terms of how successful it can be, but I don't think that it's going to be just by simply accreting artists.
Yeah. And I think, Mark, again, a legacy I'd like to leave behind is a group of people that we can mentor over the next 3 to 5 years who could take on the business. So if we can find a whole load of people who are on the way up and work with them, then it can be their company.
Yeah.
So if the next Simon Cowell is listening,
his son Eric is sadly not quite old enough, but we'd welcome him as an intern. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic stuff, fellas. Please stick around for latest or greatest, which is coming right up. And if you're enjoying The Money Trench, supported by SOUNDON and TIXEL, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice, as it really does help us keep making this podcast. But now it's time for our quickfire round with our guests, Jeremy Marsh, Marc Marot of Breaking Wave Group. Fellas, this is called Latest or Greatest. You can decide to talk about either the most recent or the all-time best music biz thing that you've experienced in these categories. And we start with the latest or greatest record that you've bought.
Mine is about my voyage through music, and so I'm going for the greatest. Okay. And it's a toss-up. It's Pink Floyd. It's back in the day. I was 18 years old. In fact, I was younger than that. Dark Side of the Moon came out, but I got into them before. I had bought Ummagumma, I had bought Atom Heart Mother, I had bought Echoes, but when Dark Side of the Moon came out, that set me for life, that music was what I was going to do.
Okay. Fantastic. Good choice. Jeremy?
I was asked to go and see Radiohead at the O2, and I had to put my hand up. I'd never seen them. So I thought, oh my God, what am I getting into? Obviously knew the music, but hadn't listened. So I went to buy the Benz and OK Computer. So they were the last 2 bits of vinyl that I bought ahead of the show. And the show just left me completely speechless. I don't think I've ever seen a band quite as different and quite as brilliant. Yeah. So amazing.
Well, 2 pretty decent albums you've got for the collection there, Jeremy. But the latest or greatest gig or festival that you've been to, this is going to be a tough one for you, I'm sure.
Probably the most satisfying was when the Stone Roses, one of them broke their arm and dropped out of Glastonbury, and at the last minute, Pulp got a call saying you're headlining the Sunday, and I hadn't got a yurt or a Winnebago or so I flew in on a helicopter, landed in Glastonbury, sat on the mixing desk drinking champagne, watching 85,000 people sing along to every word of Common People. And if I won't go into the backstory, but there was a lot of trouble getting them from signing to Common People and Glastonbury. So the satisfaction and the hair tingling on the back of your neck when everybody's singing along was just an awesome. So I'm going to probably nominate that.
Okay, I was at that gig. That was amazing.
Yeah.
I think this is the honesty moment. Thin Lizzy at Reading University. And the interesting thing is, I spent most of my career in pop, but my real love is rock. And as a kid, we would go to Guildford Civic Hall, see a lot of bands, Clapton, Camel, Manfred Mann, etc., etc. And someone said, you've got to go and see this Irish guy, Phil Lynott. And I remember going, and the great thing about a university is you're standing in the sports hall, and the beginning of a gig, the lights are on, the place looks like shit. And all you can see is the big Marshall stacks and the PA. And I sort of noticed that there were two kind of lights, flashing lights that you get on the top of ambulances sitting on top of the amps. And I thought, okay, how's this going to go off? Anyway, of course, Scott Gorham, Brian Downey, Phil Lynott, and they all come on stage and they go into jailbreak and the lights go off and these sirens go round. And Lynott comes on stage and for anyone who never saw Phil Lynott, he was one of the most incredible frontman bass player with this amazing guitar with a huge silver sort of plate that he'd use as a spotlight, and he had around the audience. And I then went and I became a member of the Thin Lizzy fan club, and it was just, they were an
What age were you, Jeremy?
Incredible. I was 16, 17 at the time.
There you go.
But they were, and it was a beer and out with the gang and whatever. But for me, Lizzy had a special live moment. I think the Thin Lizzy Live and Dangerous album was still one of the biggest selling and proper live albums.
Classic.
Yeah.
Your latest or greatest music biz boss?
Okay, I'll go. Rob Dickens, brutal but brilliant. It was my university. I think I nearly failed, but then subsequently was able to use everything that he taught me. And he's become a great friend. And he's not very well, so I wish Rob, all the best.
Okay, that's right. Mark?
Oh, you guess.
I think I can probably guess who it's going to be. But
Chris Blackwell. My father was a colonel in the army. When I told him that I was going to save the world with my weeping guitar, he literally had a ceremony and sat at the dining room table with my brothers and my mother and crossed me out of the will, literally. And Chris Blackwell, I was 24 years old, and he just took me in and he gave me everything, anything that I wanted to do. He kind of allowed me to do it on the basis that it was a risk, and if I failed, it'd have repercussions. But suddenly I was proposing TV series to Alan Yentob, and I was the music publisher for Blue Mountain Music. And Chris, I think that one of the things that happened was very early on, I signed a band called Colorbox, tiny deal. That became Mars, that became Pump Up the Volume. Number one in 16 countries, but I also signed it with Ivor Watts Russell to Island Records in America, and it became the first number one in Island Records history. And so it really put me on the map. And I was 24 years old, and so I think Chris just trusted me. And so, and I tried so hard never to betray that trust.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. The latest or greatest mistake that you've made?
Well, I'm going to start because it follows on from something that Jeremy said. I passed on a band called On a Friday. I'm not saying the words. Yeah. You can say them, Mark.
Yes, who became Radiohead. You're not the only person who's done that or admit to it on this podcast.
Is that true?
Yeah, there's definitely been others.
No, I passed on Radiohead. We were flying with so many things at the time. That I don't know. I don't think anybody was really fighting for them in the A&R department. I think that's important. But I felt we had enough. We were busy enough, as it were. And years later, funnily enough, the drummer Phil, I had lunch with him because he'd bought one of my paintings. This is amazing. And then he presented me with the beautiful box set with the bit of the studio recording tape around it, which I've still never opened. I've still got. And I told him this story, and he was like, because he bought some artwork off me. And I told him the story of how I'd passed on radio on a Friday, and he said, "You know what? Listening to those demos," he said, "I think I would too."
Yeah, but I think Mark's story is a real lesson for any young president of a label listening, because when you're flying high, as we were with Take That and Them People. We were just selling millions and millions of records. You don't always pay enough attention to something that comes in. And I had a call from Simon Fuller, who obviously had a great relationship with because of Annie Lennox. We'd had an amazing run with Diva and her solo career. And he said, I'm going to bring some girls round. Are you at your house? And I said, okay, it's Saturday morning. That's fine. I've got my kids who were 6 and 4 at the time in the playroom. And they said, fine, we're going to turn up. We've got a boombox. We're going to play a track. So anyway, I said to Emma, my wife, come here. And so this car arrived and literally chaos walked through the door. These 5 fantastically funny, kind of flirty girls. And they stood up the stairs. And I remember the picture now. And on went Wannabe. Going, I tell you what, and they went through the routine. And I rang up Mike and Hugh and whatever. And anyway, the long story short, we were just too slow, and Ray and Ashley were very, very fast on it. But it's one of those indelible memories that I had the Spice Girls perform their first song on the stairs in my house. And
you still said no.
Out they walked.
Fair enough. The latest or greatest artist that you have worked with?
Okay, so for me, I'd love to say Ed Sheeran, but Ed was just a brilliant job done by Ben and Ed and Max. And I did work it internationally, but Dua Lipa's going to get the sort of the name check for me. We worked with her from day one. I was then running international for Warner. So we took her to every country in the world. And the first 3 or 4 singles, Hotter Than Hell, Be the One, they were getting there. But then it was when we got to the track New Rules that it really exploded with the video. But in the meantime, I'll just give you one story. Every country, Max was pretty supportive in this. We pushed every country to do a big media showcase. And we were in the middle of Madrid, and the head of the Spanish company said, Jeremy, I've spent 50,000 euros getting everybody together. How is Dua? Is she going to have a good performance? So I went, let me just check. Go into the dressing room. She is spitting needles, right? She's got a sore throat. It's like, you had me on the road for all this thing. And I went, Dua, I just need you. And she looked at me, pointed her finger as if, do you doubt? And I just went, okay, I'm out of here. She walked out of the dressing room on the stage and just killed it. And rather like Madonna, she's managed by Ben Mawson at the time. And Ben also said to me, I said something like, oh, she'll be as big as Rihanna. And Ben looked at me and said, you're stupid. She's going to be bigger than Madonna. So the manager had the vision, the artist had the capability, and I have never worked with such a driven artist. She was feeling shit and she just turned it on, and the Spanish media went, wow. And it was, so she's amazing. And look at where she is now. Yeah, she's married to James Bond. I mean, for goodness sake. So Callum Turner, so.
It's not James Bond yet.
Was
that exclusive?
I think we. Sorry, yeah.
Mark, who's the greatest artist you've ever worked with?
Probably unsurprising, but U2. I was their publisher for 8 years and then ran the record label for 10 years. Worked really closely with them and with Paul McGuinness, who managed them throughout that period. So my first responsibility worldwide was Achtung Baby, which was difficult because it was a shift up from the more sort of serious 1990s into a more ironic record. First single was the only U2 track ever with no chorus, The Fly. Any of you want to sing the chorus? No. But I just found them a joy to work with. Really good people, prepared to listen, in all at the height of their success, prepared to listen, prepared to allow us to be involved in the formation of the plan and everything else.
The latest or greatest music industry party that you went to, you were there for the glory days of the music industry, fellas, so there must be some good ones.
So my one is Tony Harlow's St. Patrick's Day party when he was running Warner Australia for Ed Sheeran. So Ed played a fantastic Michael Gudinski show at one of the big stadiums, and then we all congregated in some room somewhere in Sydney. Everyone dressed in the Irish rugby shirts, and it started. And I just don't remember when it finished. It was extraordinary. But the combination of Harlow, Sheeran, Gudinski, St. Patrick's Day and Guinness, that's really all you need to say.
Okay, sounds like a good one.
It was a good night.
Mark, can you top that?
Yes, definitely, definitely. So I said early on at Island, when I was running Blue Mountain Music, Chris also gave me the responsibility for the film and television company. I had no idea that he was planning to sell up at some point. And so he asked me, could I organise the 25th anniversary of Island Records celebration? So I went into action, and we ended up with a 4-hour live Channel 4 show filmed out of Pinewood Studios. It made the BBC News because we blocked the motorway, people trying to get into Pinewood Studios. We had a half-hour Channel 4 special with all of our greatest hits, and then there was a 2-hour documentary as well. So this little company that had only 25 years old, bearing in mind ICI was 100 years old that year, we ended up with 7 hours of UK prime TV, but it was the party. So we had just the most extraordinary guests turned up, and people, you know, Eric Clapton had nothing to do with us. Ringo Starr, nothing to do with us, came and played.
Did you have Roland Rat?
No. But they came and played. So those two did I Shot the Sheriff in a Bob Marley tribute. Yeah. So we just had the most extraordinary people there. And you know, people like Ahmet Ertegun turning up. And it was just the most extraordinary thing. And I produced it. So I was effectively producing it for Ireland. And again, I was like 25 years old. And I didn't realise that I was kind of marketing Island Records. But it was a great party.
Yeah, well. Paid off. They got the deal. So, and we can't let you go without giving us a new music tip. So, have you seen anyone exciting that you?
Well, this is the controversial moment. I'm going to tip a woman called Kelly Boesch, Boesch. There's a piece of music. I was first drawn to it by the visual, so a video for a 3.5 minute piece of music, which has all of the production qualities of a Tim Burton. It's absolutely beautifully put together. And if I'd been commissioning that Island Records, I would have expected to spend £150,000 doing it. This woman is an AI specialist, and she did it all herself through her own prompts. Took a week for her to do the video. And the song is one that I can't stop listening to. It's really beautiful. It's a Christmas song, believe it or not. But why I can't stop listening to it is that she wrote the lyric, but she had Suno do the music. And it tells me not to be so afraid of AI. It tells me that AI put into the hands of a supremely creative person, a bright person. Kelly Boesch is clearly that, because I've seen her other work. So musically, it ticked all my boxes. Visually, it ticked all my boxes, but stands a repeat. I can listen to it over and over again and understand why I liked it the first time. And guys, it's AI.
Interesting. Jeremy.
That's very cool. I suppose I'm in a different place on new music, because there's a lot of artists around who are relatively new but haven't broken through. I love a band called Cardinal Black. They have a guitarist called Chris Buck, who is widely feted, was by people like Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, as one of the great sort of blues rockers. They're Welsh, and they just go round and round touring. I don't think they're ever really going to break big, but I love the fact that there's a band like that on the circuit, selling out the Shepherd's Bush Empire, taking a good core of fans. They play in America. They go and do 25 dates. They do the Troubadour, and you never know. But this guy, Chris Buck, is special. If you like guitar players, go to YouTube, check him out, because everybody follows him.
Okay, fantastic. We will check those out, but that sadly is all we have time for. A big thank you to our guests, the legends that are Jeremy Marsh and Marc Marot. Thanks very much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah. The Money Trench, the music industry podcast with me, Mark Sutherland, is supported by SOUNDON and TIXEL, and in support of Percent. It's produced by Take Notes and exec produced by Mike Walsh, with huge thanks to Sennheiser, The Fourth Pillar, and our friends at Deviate Digital for our social media. The Money Trench music is by the brilliant Tom A. Smith, and to get in touch with us, please email mike@themoneytrench.com. Thanks this week to TYX Studios for their beautiful podcast studio and facilities. TYX Studios provides premium podcasting studio facilities and production assistance right in the heart of London. Check them out at tyxstudios.com. The summer holidays are about to hit the music industry, but there's still stuff going on this week. The industry will say goodbye to the much-missed Alexi Corey Smith. H premieres his documentary Latitude, and truck festivals are on. Duetti publishes its latest music finance index, and as well as TMT Tuesday, there are big gigs for the Cribs, Bruno Mars, Black Country New Road, James Taylor, Chalk, the Maccabees and Madness. And we will be opening the TMT House of Fun again for our 100th episode on Monday, July the 27th, with another brand new episode starring another top exec who goes one step beyond. We will see you then. Jeremy and Mark, thanks for coming on the show, and good luck with Breaking Wave.
Thank you, Mark. Great.
Cheers.